Hi everybody, welcome to yet another Keyboard World webinar. This is not a live webinar and I'm not going to try and make out it is because we were very grateful that Korg UK allowed us to use one of their demonstrators, Steve Hubble. Now obviously we had to fit in with his busy schedule, so Steve was down yesterday pre-recording the webinar content for you, and a great job he did too, so I know you're going to enjoy the next hour in his company. He's going to be using actually my Pa5x, but he's going to show you a few little things which sort of crop up a lot in questions about Pa5x. He's going to talk about how we put sustain on something, which remains a bit of a mystery to some people because there isn't a sustain button on the Pa5x, but he'll show you how much more flexible the Korg system is. He's also going to show you a great little trick, and I really enjoyed watching this, watching him put this little bit together, and that's how to layer more than one sound in the left hand. So wait for that, that's coming up later in the webinar. So sit back, enjoy an hour in the company of Steve Hubble. Unfortunately for you, I will be back from time to time to have a little chat with you. But for now, I'll leave you in the very capable hands of Korg UK's Steve Hubble.
Well, thank you, Paul, for that lovely introduction. It's great to be back here with you and to be doing this webinar for Keyboard World. So what I'm going to start off with today is to answer a question that I've been asked quite a lot during my travels around the country with the Pa5x. And that is a question about sustain. Okay, now sustain really originated from the piano. On a piano, when you press a key, if you hold it down, then the sound continues for quite a time, such as this. Yeah, but if you press a key and release it, then the sound disappears fairly instantly. Okay, now the sustain effect on a piano comes via one of the pedals. If you've ever looked at a piano, you will see that we have 1, 2, sometimes even 3 pedals. If you have more than one, it's always the one on the right hand side. Okay, and that is called the damper pedal. And what the damper pedal does, it extends the sound when you take your fingers off the keys. Now, I've got a damper pedal connected to the keyboard here, so I'm just going to show you what it's like without the damper, which is this. If I just play this. Now, if I press the damper pedal, it's going to sound like this. Yeah, an entirely different sound. Now, if you're playing a bit of Beethoven, such as, or maybe a bit of Richard Clayderman, yeah, so that sustain effect is a very important part of a piano. And as I said, it is done on a piano with a pedal. Now that's fine. You can connect a pedal into your keyboard, just as I have there, and you can do exactly the same thing. However, it is an acquired technique. You have to press it down at the right time. You have to release it at the right time. So it can, for some people who maybe haven't had a background with the piano, some people can find it a little bit tricky to use. It might be that with the keyboard, you've got various other pedals connected to it, such as bass pedals, volume pedals, and so on and so forth, in which case it's very difficult to have a spare foot to be able to use the pedal. Okay, so for many years now, manufacturers have put a button on their instruments called sustain. Okay, now sustain is exactly the same thing as the damper pedal. It has the same effect, and it's a way of getting the sustain effect on your keyboard without actually having to use a pedal. Now, the question that I've been asked by lots of people is, where is the sustain button on here? Because you look at the panel and nowhere does it have a button that says sustain. Okay, so I'm happy to tell you that yes, it does have that feature, and it does it in a slightly different way, and it does it in what is actually a much more useful and better way than a simple button that switches sustain on and off. So I'm going to show you how we can do that. Okay, and that is using a part of the keyboard which we access via the menu button. So if we press menu, and then we can see the screen has changed, and one of the options for us is track controls. So if I press track controls, now the screen is showing this. We've got words such as poly and both and all sorts of things on there. They are for different things, because under track controls we can change lots of aspects of the sound, and the one that we're interested in is the sustain. So we're going to ignore that first page, and you can see down the right hand part of the screen, the second tab down says sound edit. So I'm going to press that. The screen has now changed, and once again we have lots of different things that will all change aspects of the sound. Now, the one that we're interested in is sustain. We're not interested in the rest of them. But if we look, there actually isn't anything on there that says sustain. And the reason that that's like that is because most companies who make synthesizer keyboards actually use a third name for the same effect, and that name is release. And when you think about it, it makes perfect sense, because it's what happens when you actually release the key. Okay, so release, sustain, and the damper effect are all the same thing. Okay, so what we're going to do is modify this section here, the release section, and that is going to give us the sustain without having to use the pedal. Now, my piano sound is currently selected onto upper one, so I need to make sure that in the display here, then upper one is selected. And if you look at the display, you can see we have upper 1, 2, 3, lower. Also the pads, we can add this effect to pads should we want to, but we're adding it to our piano, which is on upper 1. So we're just going to make sure that we've got upper 1 selected. There it is. And now we need to start adding release to the sound. Now the release is currently set on 0. If we tap the release button, there you can see it highlights it in orange. And what we can now do is use the data wheel here, turn it clockwise, and as we do, you will see that that number is going up. Okay, and I'm going to turn that all the way up. The highest it goes to is 63. And that has added the total amount of release that we can onto the sound. So if I play the sound again now, without pressing the pedal this time, then we're going to get this. Which is exactly the same effect as we had when we pressed the pedal. Okay, so now we can add a style into this, and we can play some very nice piano without having to worry about pressing the pedal, releasing the pedal, so on and so forth, because the sustain effect, the release effect, is doing the job for us. And I was playing that in piano style. I know a lot of people play their arranger keyboards in that way, but if you actually prefer to play in a more traditional keyboard style with a split point and chords in your left hand, then it's still going to sound just as good. And so on and so forth. Yeah. So that is a very useful feature to have. Now, the reason it's better than a simple sustain button that you switch on and off is because you can add as much or as little of this to every single section on the keyboard. Okay, so if, for example, we wanted to put, say, some strings with our piano, I'm going to go to upper 2, and I'm going to choose the ballad strings D, and so those are my go-to strings. They are fabulous string sounds. So in upper 1 we have our piano with our sustain on it. Now upper 2 and our strings, those are lovely strings, but they actually have a certain amount of sustain effect built into them anyway. So if we were to simply have a button that said sustain, and that added sustain to the piano and the strings at the same time and the same amount, we would end up with too much sustain on the string sound. So the beauty of this is that we can go to the menu, go back to track controls. Now currently the upper 1 is selected, and we can see that the release on that is 63. We can go to upper 2 now, and the release is 0. And if I turn that up to maybe 20, that is as much as we would need on that particular sound. So now when we put the two together, we have the piano, which has got a release time of 63, and a string sound, which has got a release time of 20. Yeah, so that is so useful to be able to have different levels of release on different parts of the instrument. And you know, you can even, as we said earlier, you can even put release on things like the pads. Now I have a pad that I've created here, which is a cymbal roll, and it's literally lots of taps on a normal cymbal off a normal drum kit, each one getting slightly louder, and it sounds fine as it is. But if you add release to it, it makes all those cymbal hits, those cymbal taps blend together. So you end up with something that sounds like this. Yeah, so it can be very useful to add to any of your pads. Some of the pads have things like harp sounds, piano sounds. You can add the sustain release effect onto any of the pads that are on here, regardless of whether they are pads that you've created or whether they are actually part and parcel of what's available for you, that Korg have put in there for you. And it gets even better than that, because if you go back to our screen and you see down the bottom here, the bottom right hand side, if I press because we're on the pads and the keyboard sets at the moment, if I press that, it now changes and it is now showing the style. Okay, and we can now add this release effect to any of the parts that make up the style. So you could, for example, on accompaniment 2 on here is we can see is a string ensemble. Accompaniment 1 is a German jazz grand piano. If you wanted, you could add sustain release to those sounds as well. So it's way more useful than the traditional method of just pressing a sustain button. So hopefully that's answered that question. Now I will just say that obviously we've pressed quite a few buttons there to get this this effect. Now you are probably going to want to save that. Okay, and on here we have the easy save that you could possibly have, because what you do once you've pressed all your buttons and you've got the sound just as you want it, the style just as you want it, you simply press book, hold it down, you can give it a name over here, and then once you're happy, so I could call that test for example, press OK, and then it's simply pressing save. It asks whether you're sure, just to make sure that that's what you want to do. Press yes, and all those button presses are saved for you. So that makes it as easy as possible to get that back. So hopefully that's answered that question. I'm going to hand you back to Paul now, and I shall see you in a little while.
Well, thanks, Steve, for that really useful information there about how to use sustain. Isn't it fantastic that you can put different levels of sustain on different sections of sound, and you can vary the amount of sustain? That it really is an incredible feature, and most importantly, it's not difficult to do. And once you've done it a couple of times, it'll be like second nature to you. We are really grateful to Steve, because he's driven up all the way from a lovely seaside resort where I spent much of my younger days doing summer season, and that was down in Weymouth in Dorset, and that's where Steve hails from. So he's literally had a 3.5 hour drive up here this morning, had a quick cup of coffee, and then got straight onto the recording. I haven't done that sort of thing for about 4 years, and I'm really puzzled now as to how people do these long journeys. I used to do it all the time, but I don't think I could do it now. But we are grateful to him, and the great thing about Steve is he's always got a smile on his face, particularly when I'm feeding him. He loves it. But yeah, we're really grateful. And Steve's now going to move on to show you another couple of things. He'll start by basically showing you how the splits work on a Pa5x, because I think we all know how to put the standard split on, but do you know you can split the keyboard or create zones? And then he'll sort of show you how you can use that to great effect in a song. So it is back to Mr. Korg himself, Steve Hubble.
Well, welcome back. Now I have to tell you that Paul did did explain that I've forgotten one or two things, but it didn't hit me that hard, so that's all right. So no, what it was when I showed you how to save that file, which we call test, then we thought it was probably a good idea for me to show you how you get it back, you see. So all you do is press book, and if you look at the entries, there is test, and you press that, and if you remember, we put piano mixed with strings, and there it is. So that is how you get your file back once you've saved it. Okay, you're going to move on now, and I'm going to look at another very useful feature that we have on here called range. Okay, now just before I do that, I'm going to explain a little bit about the layout of the keyboard and how we would actually just go about playing it normally. Because as we have with many other arranger keyboards, we can have up to 4 sounds active at one point in time. And those sounds are labelled upper 1, upper 2, upper 3 and lower. And we also, in the same section of the keyboard, have the split button, which splits the keyboard pretty much anywhere you want it to. And that is the way you would normally play your keyboard. Now, the upper sounds are only become upper sounds when the keyboard is split. So if we don't split the keyboard and we simply choose upper 1, that is going to sound over the entire keyboard. And that's how earlier on we were playing the piano sounds over the entire keyboard. So what I've got here, in upper 1, I've got a nice electric piano sound. Which is a really nice sound. So when you normally play the keyboard, you would either play that over the entire instrument, or you may decide to split the keyboard and then use a style in the left hand. And you would normally use 1 or maybe 2 or maybe even 3 sounds together. The whole point of having an upper 2 and an upper 3 section on the keyboard is so you can combine sounds together to get bigger and more colourful sounds. In the last part, we combined a normal piano and some strings. Now here on upper 2, I have got a really lovely sound called FM Piano and Pad, which sounds like this. Quite similar to the electric piano, not the same. This is the electric piano again. And of course, if we press both buttons together, we now have created a layer. We have 2 sounds together. Okay, and it's going to give us a bigger and more more luxurious type of sound. which is absolutely lovely. This is the single sound again. This is the layered sound. And of course we can go to upper 3 and add a different sound again. Now on this occasion, on upper 3, I've got some synth strings which sound like this. And if we put all 3 on, then we are going to have a very big sound now. Now again, I'm playing that piano style. For those who prefer to play with chords and a split keyboard, I'm going to put this keyboard split on. Now, incidentally, when you put the key split on, then these 3 upper sounds now are assigned to the upper part of the keyboard. They don't sound below the split point. Now my split point is here, on this note here. So if I play a note below that, we actually don't get a sound, because these sounds are only going down as far as the split point. What happens with the left hand is that the left hand, when I play my chords, it's telling the keyboard which chords to play, and it even tells us in the top right of the screen which chord I'm playing. So if I put the style on and play with just my left hand chords, you're not actually going to hear a sound on the keys, but what you will hear is the style. Now, that is where the lower sound comes in, because when you now select lower, because the split is on, then the lower sound is going to play in the bottom half of the keyboard over the top of the style. Now, I've chosen some strings in the lower part. Again, my go-to strings, the ballad strings D and C, and now we are going to hear those over the top of the style, which is going to make a really lovely warm sound for the left hand. So there we've got all 4 sections on. We have 3 sounds for our right hand, the upper part, and we have 1 sound for the lower part on top of the style, which gives us a really nice, big and rich sound. And that is the way that you would use these parts of the keyboard most of the time. But I'm going to show you a couple of other ways now of doing it, which is going to utilize this range feature. Okay, and to show you this, I'm going to play the introduction to one of the songs that I always play when I'm doing my shows. It's one of the very popular songs, which is the theme from Out of Africa by John Barry. Now, the introduction for this consists of 3 different sounds. We have a French horn, we have a string orchestra, and we have an oboe. Okay, now what I'm going to do for this one, I am going in the left hand to use my strings, And the style is what we call a freestyle, which means that it doesn't actually have a rhythm attached to it. So we don't have drums and bass in the normal sense of a style. We can play freely. We can slow up, we can speed up, we can do whatever we want. And that is perfect for this. So this is what's happening in our left hand. We can hear strings and a nice orchestral bass provided by the style. So that is our left hand. Now we are now going to focus on the upper parts, which are of course playing above the split point. Now the first is the French horn. Now the French horn, what it actually plays is this. Then we have the string orchestra, which plays this. Followed by the oboe, which plays this. Let's put the oboe on, that's better. Okay, now we could play this perfectly normally. So I'm going to put the French horns on first. We're going to use our style and we're going to play it like this. And then the main tune comes in. Okay, so you can do it like that, but you have to take your hand off the keys in between each sound, switch the one sound off, switch the next one on, so on and so forth. And that can be quite tricky to do. Maybe not so much on this tune, which is fairly slow, but if you're playing something that's pretty quick, then it's quite hard to do that and keep it all in time. So that is where this wonderful feature called range comes in. And what that allows us to do is assign a range of notes for each one of these parts. Okay, so I'm going to go into this now, menu. This time, rather than the track controls which we used earlier, I'm using the keyboard ensemble. Once again, it does lots of different things for us, and we're only interested in the range part. We can look at some of the others in later webinar, but what we're interested in is the range. So down the screen, we press the range button, and again, it's on the bottom part of the screen, it's talking about velocity, which is how hard you hit the keys, and you can have different effects depending on how hard you press. We're not bothered about that. What we're interested in is the top two rows, which is the top key and the bottom key. Okay, now we can, if we look along the bottom, we have of the screen, we have upper 1, upper 2 and upper 3. And for each one of those, we have a top key setting and a bottom key setting. Okay, now the settings are notes on the keyboard. If you imagine, we've got lots of C notes, lots of D notes and so on and so forth. Now the top key is G9. Now that is the 9th G up the keyboard. Now this is only a 61 note keyboard. We don't have 9 Gs on the keyboard, so that is somewhere up here. If we have an 88 note, then we probably would. Okay, so it means the top key is higher than the top note on the keyboard. And the bottom key, it says C-1. Again, that is going to apply to an 88 note keyboard. So it's lower than the lower note that we have on here. So that's why all these sounds, upper 1, 2 and 3, without the split point being selected, can play over the entire range of the keyboard. Now, if I was to switch all the upper sounds on together, upper 1, 2 and 3, what we've done is create a layer, so each of the 3 sounds are playing in the same part of the keyboard, which is what we wanted earlier. But we don't want that now, and in fact if I play this, it's quite a nice sound, but it's certainly not the French horns on their own, the strings on their own, and the oboe on its own. So what we have to do is simply modify the top and the bottom keys so it restricts the instruments to play in a certain range. Now, the first one we are going to consider is the French horn. And let's just remind ourselves what notes the French horn is playing. It's doing this. So it's actually playing in a range between this B note here and this B note here. Okay. So what we need to do is modify the top notes, because we don't want it to play up here. We only want it to go as far as this B note here. So with upper 1 selected, I'm going to press the top key, which is somewhere up here, and we're going to turn the wheel anti-clockwise, and it's going to bring that down. Now if you don't know which B this is, just keep doing that until it disappears. Now it's back. So this is the 4th B up the keyboard. Okay, B number 4. Now the bottom key that the French horn is playing is this one here. So that, if this is B4, then it stands a chance that's going to be B3. Okay, so I'm going to move that up. So that is set to B3. And that has put the French horn just in this range here. We get nothing above or below. Okay, so the next sound is on the upper 2 section, and that is the string sound. Now the string sound, just to remind you, is doing this. So that is between this A here and this E here. So I'm going to modify the top note again. I'm going to make sure that the top note goes up as far as this A here. So that is A5. So it doesn't play above that. And the bottom key wants to be, the next is E here. Okay, so I'm going to move that up until we have E4. E5. E5 is what we want. So now we have the strings just restricted to this area here. Now our oboe is playing this. So on right 3, we are going to set. Now you can leave the top notes as G9 because you don't need to change it because there's nothing above this, but you could do if you wanted to. But what you do need to do is make sure that it only goes down above the strings. Okay, so I'm going to set this one there we go, D6, that is D6. And now if I put all three on together and I play the French horn bit down here, I only have French horns. Now without pressing another button, I can move up the keys. And there are our strings. And again, without pressing the button, I can move up and play the oboe. So we're almost there. We do have a problem because the oboe is very high. Now, because we're playing it right at the top of the keyboard, we would normally play it down here, but we can't do that because that's where the strings are. So we need to drop that down an octave. Okay, now to do that, I'm going to come out of this, and that is done with the mixer. Okay, any changes to any sounds are done via the mixer, and the mixer on here is brilliant. We're going to have a look at this at a later date because the mixer on the Pa5x is a fabulous feature. But what we need to do is just look at a small part of it today, which is the part where it enables us to bend or tune a sound. Okay. Now, there are two ways to access the mixer. You can either press mixer on the screen, and that takes us to the small view of the mixer, which is surrounded by the style, which is rather a nice view. And then you can press the expand button there, which takes it to the full mixer. Or you can press menu and press mixer. It doesn't make any difference, takes you to the same place. Now, we've got lots of features and functions that the mixer does. We are only interested in moving the octave of that oboe, and that is under bend and tuning. So if I press bend and tuning, now the oboe is on upper 3. Okay, and if we look in the middle, these white buttons here, these white knobs here, what we need to do is we need to reduce this down. Now, an octave is made up of 12 steps. Okay, so to take this down an octave, we need to take it down not 1 step, but 12. So I'm going to just highlight the part that I want to change, turn it down to -12, and that has now put the oboe in the correct octave. And that's it, it's done. Don't forget, we could save that, but let me just show you now how we can play our tune. And it means that we haven't got to take our hand off. We can just move our hand up the keyboard and we will get the different sounds we want. So that is a very, very useful feature. And it enables you to put different sounds in different areas of the keyboard. Now, I did say earlier that that is a fairly slow tune, and it's not that difficult to do it by pressing the buttons. But this is an example of a tune where it would be difficult. Okay, so yeah, so it's quite quick to do that. So that would have been very difficult pressing buttons, but we can do that simply by moving up to the next part of the keyboard. And one final example, this is a Christmas tune. This has been done in exactly the same way. We have a pan flute down in the lower part of the upper part of the keyboard. We have a bell sound, and we have some French horns, which again we've dropped the octave down there, so we can play things like this. So there we are, and don't forget, you can save it just like we did last time. Okay, so that very, very useful feature. So back to Paul.
Well, I'm sure you enjoyed that section. Do you know what? I've had a great day actually just watching Steve put these little things together and explaining them, and I think he explains them really, really well. And I think it's great if you spend that extra bit of time and you just think about the piece you're going to play, and you know, would it help if I put a certain sound in a certain area? That sort of extra 10 minutes spent is well worth it. And of course, the nice thing is when you save things, you only have to do that once, so it's time well spent. So this final little section, I think, well, is something that intrigued me when I first saw him do it, because genuinely I'd never thought of doing this. On most arranger keyboards we have a certain number of sounds to use on the right hand, and if we've got the keyboard split we normally have one lower section. But what Steve's now going to come back and show you is how he can layer more than one sound in the left hand. Watch this, because it really is a great little trick. Okay, so welcome back. So far we have looked at how to use the upper 1, 2 and 3 together as layers, so you have 3 different sounds playing in the same area of the keyboard. And we also looked at how to use the range control, so you can split those layers up and have different sounds in different areas of the keyboard. Now, what I'm going to show you now is something that's a little bit different. Not a lot of people may have even thought about this, but this is a way that you can actually put 2 sounds in your left hand. Okay, now normally, as we've said, on the keyboard, if you choose split and you play a note down here, unless you have a lower sound on, you don't get a sound. It still sounds great when you put the style on. This piece of music is a piece of music very popular
a little bit of Stephen Sondheim. This is Sending the Clowns, and for this we're going to use an oboe in our right hand on upper 1, and we're using a 6/8 style, and we can play and we will get this. Now that sounds absolutely fine, because we've got a really nice style playing, but of course we don't actually have any sound in our left hand. So what we do for that, we put the lower sound on. In this case I have got my go-to strings again in the lower, and when I play now, then we are going to have that lovely warm string sound over the top of the style. Which sounds really nice. Other alternatives for the left hand could be maybe the piano sound. Okay, so now we have the oboe in the right and a piano sound in the left hand, and that's really nice because the piano really defines the chords when you play them. So with the piano in the left hand, we're going to get this. Again, another lovely sound, but we've lost the strings, yeah, and they made a really nice warm sound in the left hand. And I thought it's a shame because most arranger keyboards, in fact every one that I know of, you can actually only have one sound in the left hand. And for those of us who have come to our arranger keyboards maybe from an organ background, then you might be used to being able to put a couple of sounds in the left hand and having a nice thick warm sound in the left hand. But using our range function that we have on here, we can actually get around that, and we can do that. Now this has been created in exactly the same way as what I showed you earlier. I'm not going to go through all the setups, I'm just going to show you what the results are. Okay, so if I play this, we are now having an oboe in the right hand, but we have piano and strings in our left hand. Which is a fabulous sound in the left hand because you've got the beauty of the piano, and you've also got the strings layered on the top. And let me just show you how we've done that. Okay, I don't need to go through the entire process, just show you the settings, but we're going back to menu and we go into keyboard ensemble like we did before. And now what I've done, I've created what I refer to as a virtual split point. So we're not using the actual split on the keyboard, because if we do, we can only use a lower sound and just one lower sound. So we've switched the keyboard split off, and I've used the range on the upper 1 you can see the top range is G9, which is up here, which is fine. The bottom key for the for upper one is C4, which is this C here. Okay, so upper one isn't going down any further than that, and that is where I normally have my split points, which is why I call this a virtual split point. And then upper 2 and 3, rather than like in the last section that we did when they had a separate area, they are sharing the lower part of the keyboard. So the bottom key for upper 2 and 3 is C-1, which is off the end of the keyboard, which is fine. The top key is B3, which is this B here. Okay, now you can't have the same note as the bottom key of the upper 1 section, because if you do, then what's going to happen, they're both going to play. And in fact, if I put that one on there as well, so we've now got the upper 2 and upper 3, they will all play the same note. So you have to put those one note below. Okay, so that's the settings that we've made. The bottom key of the upper 1 is this C here, C4, and the top key for upper 2 and upper 3 is this B here. And that way we have created this virtual split points, which enables us to have 2 lovely sounds in our left hand. And that's it. Once again, you can save it as soon as you finish that, and you can have lots and lots of fun with that. Let's just have a look and see what else you could do. You could, for example, if I choose this again, we have an oboe in our right hand. In our left hand, we have a string sound and we have a bass sound. So that way, without any style on at all, we can play some lovely orchestral music such as this. So it is a very, very useful feature, and all because we have this wonderful facility on here called Keyboard Ensemble. So there we go. Hope you found that interesting, and I will hand you back to Paul.
Steve, thank you so much for what you've done for us here at Keyboard World, and a very, very special thanks to Korg UK for supplying Steve to do this webinar for us. There will be a few more special dedicated Korg webinars, as there will Yamaha webinars throughout the year. But as many of you know, the Pa5x is my weapon of choice. I just love this instrument, and I think if people take the time to just delve into it a little bit below the surface, it's capable of some incredible things, and overall for me it's just an amazing sound. And to prove that, we're going to finish off with a little bit of music from Steve, and lovely piece of music he's about to play. And yeah, thanks to you for watching. Thanks to Steve for coming along and eating all my food and drinking all my coffee. And we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Bye for now, and thanks for watching.